Hello. In the second video on Charles Horton Cooley, I will look at his concepts of the looking glass self and the development of human nature, both massively influential in the future development of sociological thinking. Let us start with the relationship between the individual and society. For Cooley, the common sense view that individuals and society were separate entities was incorrect. Human bodies were distinct entities, but what we are is always, in part, social. The individual's mind, his or her consciousness, always developed in the process of communication with others. The things that we find meaningful and significant in our experiences are shaped by our social awareness and relationships. The judgments we form, the moral values we adopt, the aesthetic tastes we acquire, the symbols of ritual and belief we consider important are formed in a social context and are simultaneously aspects of our own individuality and shared with others. Similarly, society does not exist separately from the individuals who comprise it. Self and society are twin-born, and they develop together. There is an organic link and indissoluble connectedness between them. We cannot say that the individual exists prior to or separate from society. Of course, it is a common belief that society is simply an aggregate of individuals, but this is a mistaken notion. It stems from the tangible nature of individual bodies and the seeming intangibility of society. In reality, the individual and society are a common whole, however. Indeed, it is almost impossible for us to think of ourselves apart from the primary social groups of which we form a part, or to think of those groups except with reference to ourselves. Everything that I say or think has been influenced by what others have said or thought before, and in turn is influential on what others think or say. To a certain extent, then, we are all products of society. We inherit a social past, which we acquire through interaction with the immediate others in our early childhood, and this social past includes language, education, and culture. But at the same time, unless constrained, we are able to make choices within our environing society, to join particular groups, to function in our own particular way, and to exercise our individual creativity, given our particular powers and opportunities. Even if we become socially isolated in later life, island castaways like Robinson Crusoe, or desert hermits like Simeon Stylites, then our minds have already been formed by social interaction when we were younger, and we continue to interact socially with others in our memories and imagination, or with the aid of books. This said, different levels of analysis are possible depending on our research interests. From this standpoint, it is legitimate to distinguish between the individual and society. To write a biography of a specific individual is a different project from analyzing a social institution, such as an army or a church. Furthermore, large institutions amount to more than an aggregation of individuals because of their often complex organization. An individual who sees an approaching regiment of soldiers, for example, is likely to see them as more than a simple mass of men because of the way in which they are coordinated and share a common purpose. Again, to study a nation's economy requires identifying social processes and is more than simply aggregating individuals' economic actions. For Cooley, social communication was an essential condition for the emergence of self-consciousness. We were not born with consciousness of self. Rather, the sense of self emerged during early childhood in a process that he termed the looking-glass self. The young child initially experienced its world as a stream of impressions, the definition of which depended upon the developing organization of the child's mind, a process which necessarily took place in the social context of other human beings, such as close family members. Long before the child learned to speak, it had developed a complex web of communication with the immediate others it interacted with, relying on such cues as gesture, touch, tone of voice, and facial expression. Through this process, the growing child became aware both of himself or herself and of the specific individuals in its immediate environment, mother, father, siblings, and so on. Self-awareness and social awareness developed together. There can be no individual personality independent of society, no isolated self, since I only exists in association with others. It is a looking-glass self because it is reflective and emerged in interchange with others, and in particular of the judgments and evaluations of the individual which were made by immediate others. Incidentally, this understanding had important implications for the study of psychology, which for Cooley can only offer valid insights if it does not ignore the role played by social processes in the creation of human experiences and human nature. It should be noted that Cooley's concept of communication with others involves far more than consciousness as a mental process, but incorporates all aspects of experience and behavior. Hence his approach was often termed at the time behavioristic, before John Watson's behaviorism became a dominant paradigm in psychology and came to define the modern usage of the term. Again, Cooley did not discount the importance of instinct as a factor in human nature and behavior, but emphasized the major role that could be played by human reason in shaping, directing, and governing it. As a corollary, Cooley viewed human nature as relatively malleable and something that could change under different social conditions. The biological endowment would not change, so there were common human instincts and emotions, but even many universal human traits might be explained by the commonly shared experience of growing up and living in relatively small social groups, primary groups as he called them, in which individuals developed their sense of self, learned to value praise and resent censure, emulate others, and formed a sense of right and wrong. The next video on Cooley will deal with his concept of the primary group. Thank you for listening.